Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Bate Collection continuing cycle of lunchtime recitals. This is the first recital of 2013, and as you can see, we're going all Tudor.
Yes. Yes.
Although that's the theme, but it's not an absolute rule. James is now a graduate student. He used to be an undergraduate at Oxford, and in his first year very kindly came and did a concertina kind of show and tell thing for one of our family fun days, and has been a regular loyal user of Bate ever since. So you can imagine his surprise when I asked him, "Oh, you could do a recital for us, couldn't you?" And I could hear the mental gears shifting suddenly. So I'm so grateful, I'm very pleased that he's agreed to come and give us a little recital and a presentation today. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Emphasis on little. I won't play or talk with you for very long. I'll just say a few things. This is the English concertina, as opposed to the Anglo or Chemnitzer or all sorts of the varieties. It's a free reed instrument, so the same family of instruments as accordions and reed organs and harmoniums and instruments of that ilk. It was patented in 1829 by Charles Wheatstone of Wheatstone Ridge fame, who's a fairly prominent Victorian engineer, and for some reason decided to design a musical instrument. So this sort of pattern of instrument and key layout was his invention. They typically have 6 sides, some have 8 or 12. The maker of this one is Lewis Lachenal and Company, Patent Concertina Manufacturers, London. And Lachenal was a craftsman who worked in Wheatstone's workshop, and then subsequently started his own business in the latter half of the 19th century. The sound is made by metal reeds which have a sort of elasticity. It's somewhat somewhere between a harmonium and an accordion sound. I'd say I'll play something before I chat anymore. This is some Bach. It's from a violin partita. there's something of a sort of performance tradition of playing Bach solo violin works on the concertina. The Victorian concertina tutors, sort of self-tutor books, which are sort of intended for a fairly bourgeois audience of sort of self-taught amateurs, I suppose. Is a fairly bourgeois sort of instrument. Draw out the parallels between the violin and the concertina. So there are a couple of aspects in which they're similar. The range is almost identical from this G below the treble clef to a G some 4 octaves above it. This instrument actually has larger than usual number of keys, which give extra notes at the treble range, so it kind of goes to. Which is not usually necessary to get up to. Oh yes, parallels between the violin and the concertina. So the range is similar. The tutor tune books also suggest that the bellows are analogous to the bowing. So the idea is to shape a phrase. You would change bellow direction at the same time as you would with a bow on a stringed instrument. And to a large extent that holds. That's the way you sort of shape a longer phrase or a series of notes. You can sort of with legato or and sort of emphasise staccatos in that way. Some more advanced concertinas had extra buttons which allowed you to push or pull air through the instrument without actually playing a note. So the idea was that if you sort of didn't have any squeezing room left, that you could sort of let in extra air. What else can I say about this? This instrument is probably circa 1926. I think that's about the nearest I've been able to date it based on the serial number. The Wheatstone instruments, of which there are a very large collection in the Horniman Museum in London, everybody knows about that. The Wheatstone instruments, we know the original owners because the sales ledgers were kept and they're now in the Horniman Museum. With the Lachenal instruments, these ledgers were destroyed, so we don't have any idea of who originally bought these instruments or what dates they were manufactured. But based on some other circumstantial evidence, the nearest I've been able to find to my serial number is 1926. I'll play some. This is a sort of high Victorian piece, which I think to a certain extent sort of emulates Bach. This is by Giulio Rigondi, who's also known as the Great Rigondi. He was a classically trained guitar player, and he sort of became an early virtuoso on the concertina, and he sort of gave lectures and performances to great acclaim in London in sort of 1850s, 1860s, around about that time. So this is just a study piece that he wrote, which is sort of quite Bach-like in nature. quite a lot longer than that. You can usually sort of get the idea. It's these finger gymnastics. It may look like a complete mess of unidentifiable buttons. There is some logic to the way that they're laid out, and there's a couple of interesting things from a pedagogical perspective. Based on the treble clef in this layout, all notes which are on stave lines are on this side of the instrument, and all notes which are in the spaces, or the spaces between the ledger lines, are on this side of the instrument. So to play a scale, one alternates between the two sides of the instrument. So in C major, my first note is with my right hand, and the second is with my first note is with my left, then right, left, right, left, right, left, right. And the notes are arranged in a sort of triangle pattern. So that's a C, that's an E, that's a G. So a triad is like that. So you can do the 3-chord trick. And sort of things like that. Oh yeah, another interesting bit of trivia. The Victorian concertina tutors advocate a couple of different ways of playing. The standard way for a gentleman to play is like this, with the arms parallel to the ground and with one finger in the cup. So you play it with 3 fingers. The standard method for a lady is sat down, still with fingers in the little cup here, and with 3 fingers. The sort of advanced method is to use 4 fingers, which allows you to have pretty much 1 finger for every row running along the length, and that's not always necessary. Sometimes it is. There's one little party piece which sort of became a mainstay of sort of music hall and showpiece performances, and that was that you can achieve the Doppler effect with the instrument. This is somewhat dangerous, so stand back, ladies and gentlemen.
You've got to sign over your head.
Yeah, you get there. It's a bit powerless.
I could actually see it going blue.
Oh yeah, another trivial one. The Wheatstone ledgers have an instrument which was manufactured for a musical variety act. This instrument has 6-fold bellows. This manufactured instrument had 50-fold bellows. So the idea was that the concertinist would play it whilst skipping. Needless to say, it didn't work. That was its first and only performance. So I don't know. This could be an urban myth. I don't know. I don't know who makes these things up.
Sounds perfect.
I came to this instrument through folk music. So although there's a sort of 19th century repertoire associated with it, it sort of had a revival of interest in the general folk revival in the 60s, so it's mainly just used for sort of session playing nowadays. There are a couple of sort of serious players who play the Victorian repertoire. They're few and far between. The gentleman who wrote this book, Alan Atlas, who's also a sort of musicologist of Renaissance music, also happens to be a professional concertina player. They sort of, you find them in all different nooks and crannies. So I'll play some northern English tunes. The first one is called the Old Lancashire Hornpipe, and the second one is the Cheshire Rounds, or one version of the Cheshire Rounds, the versions. exhausted my trivia and the pieces I have prepared. I can do more tunes if you want.
Oh, yes. Yes.
All right.
I think that's a yes.
Okay. All right. Here's quite a local tune. This one's called "Old Tom of Oxford," referring to the world famous bell, which is somewhere nearby, I think.
I'm sure you'd all like to join me in thanking James for his very illuminating and entertaining little session. Now, before we go into questions, I should just say we don't have funds to finance these little entertainments and recitals that we put on, but I did just nip across the road and buy a Lynch chocolate goldberry. It's going to be Easter very soon. And I've also got a packet of 9 chocolate brownie bites. Entirely appropriate. And I'm sure James would love to answer all of your questions, and complete with musical demonstrations.
Could you comment on the sort of size and portability of the instrument? Because I mean, this suggests that I mean, in terms of folk dancing and so on, it would be a useful accompaniment.
It is, and many Morris sides use them, and many sort of solo sort of clog dancers use them. The English concertina isn't quite used so frequently in dance music as the Anglo type. The difference being both the key layout and the fact that in the English you have the same note on the both bellow directions, whereas with the Anglo you get a different note, more like a suddenly blowing on a harmonica. There's a fantastic recording of a Suffolk-based concertina play called Scantester. A recording he made in the 70s, and I think it's probably been re-released on LP and CD since, where he plays with so much energy. Actually, you can sort of put a lot more energy into playing with an Anglo than you can with an English. The English is sort of designed for melodic playing, whereas the Anglo is designed for sort of vamping, sort of chord vamping as well. Very commonly used in dance music of all sorts.
Did William Kimber have one? He was a famous local concertina player who played. Was it Headington Quarry?
Yes.
He's probably the same generation as Scantestis, with the people that were in their 80s during the during the folk revival. No, that name rings a bell. I might know some tunes reflected from him, but
Yes.
I can't.
William Kimber and the Headington Quarry Morris men were dancing because the winter was hard. Normally, as Morris men, they only danced during the summer, but because one particular winter in 1998 to 9 was particularly hard. No, 18. 18. I'll take yours. 100 years later, they danced outside in Headington. They danced outside a cottage that was owned by the mother-in-law of Cecil Sharp, and that's where Cecil Sharp heard the tunes and saw the Morris, and that was what kick-started the Morris revival. And they reconstructed that event 100 years later. And William Kimber's grandson danced a solo jig to Old Mother Oxford. Sorry, I'm because we were there. So yes.
The other one I heard, I saw a couple of years ago, there was another one of these concertina revivals. And apparently during the 1930s, and we're thinking of things like the Jarrow Crusades and so forth, they used to have concertina bands, you know, with their cloth caps marching along very sternly. And I think that figured quite.
Yes, I mean this isn't the only size of instrument. This is an instrument. This one specifically is an extended range treble. The typical one is just called a treble, and then you have large sizes. Tenor treble, which has extra notes at the bottom, then tenor, baritone, bass, sub bass. What do Lynn and Peter have? Is there a bass?
Sub bass.
There's a sub bass.
Yes.
So the reeds in a sub bass instrument are so large that you only have notes for squeezing. You don't have notes for the bellows going out because it takes it takes two reeds to produce one note because every reed only works in one direction. So they were manufactured in all different sizes. Especially duet concertinas can be sort of, about yay large with some very deep reeds and a very large range. And the smallest one I think had 6. The smallest English one was made by Wheatstone and had 6 buttons. It's sort of that big.
I did see in the Horniman, if you get the opportunity to go to the Horniman Museum, they do have part of their permanent exhibition. The original Wheatstone plans and tools, and they've also got some other Wheatstone inventions, including a very early kind of Morse code system button key thing, which looks startlingly like that.
James, you talked about the Wheatstone factory. So it was mass manufactured in the latter end of the 19th century, rather than being made by piece, because researching my own genealogy and a forebear who was a piano maker, he was a piano cabinet maker, and there were in just north of Tottenham Court Road, going up towards King's Cross and that area. That was where people were making bits of pianos, but they were made cottage style.
Yes, I mean they were certainly made in quite large batches. This is a very elaborate instrument as far as the range goes. The sort of the more basic ones, which were produced in huge numbers, just had flat wooden ends with perhaps bone keys, and weren't anywhere near so ornate in carving, and some had brass reeds rather than steel. There's a couple of different sort of types of reeds, and fewer bellows. They're all quite ornate actually, because some bellows have really fancy floral sort of papers. But yes, mass manufactured in the Victorian sense of the word. And Lachenal himself actually came up with some of these processes before he sort of branched out and set up his own rival factory.
So prior to that, you could sort of trace it back another 100 years on homemade ones, as it were. Cottage industry.
Wheatstone painted it for the first time in 1829, I don't think his experiments went back much further than that. And it sort of co-evolved independently in Germany and England. Both Wheatstone and his sort of German counterparts came up with something fairly similar. But the Germans are obviously famous for accordions and sort of button accordions especially. The Viennese manufactures those instruments as well.
I had heard that the full name of the Anglo Concertina was actually the Anglo-German
It is.
Concertina.
Although quite what's German about it, I don't know, because it was also the actual pattern layout was devised by Wheatstone, as far as I know. So quite why it's called the Anglo-German, I don't know. Maybe it's certainly more similar to the German concertinas of the period than the English layout.
Were melodians and which of course Queen's Boxes.
Yeah, accordions.
They existed before concertinas, did they?
Not for very long. Maybe a decade or so. They're all sort of 1810s, 1820s. Was around about the time that they sort of came from as period instruments. I'm not sure if there's a technical reason, but maybe, if there's a technical reason why they might not have been made before that, because there were sort of ancient forebears, like in China there was an instrument called the sheng, which sort of has these free reeds, and it sounds remarkably like a very pure harmonica. And these sort of things have resonating pipes, and these are sort of thousands of years old in China, but as far as I know it's independent, sort of purely environment.
And it sort of begs the question, why invent it? If you see what I mean.
I think you're thinking the wrong question. The question is, why not invent it?
Yes, but I wonder what Wheatstone's thinking behind was it to have an instrument that was portable, an instrument that was accessible to perhaps not the ordinary working man, but certainly to people who had a little bit of money, maybe couldn't afford a piano.
Yes.
I think it goes beyond that. I attended the lecture, Graham Wells's lecture on Northumbrian pipes.
Yes.
And he raised the very solid point that these instruments were made from top quality materials.
Yes.
They were not designed as artisan instruments at all. They were very bourgeois parlour instruments. I think the same is very true of these kinds of instruments.
Oh yes, yes.
So was it? Do you think it was driven by? I mean, obviously, so Rigondi was a great champion sort of for the concertina. I wonder whether or not if Rigondi hadn't existed and shown, sort of wandered around showing people, look what you can do, what impressive kind of music you can play on the concertina. I wonder whether or not the whole thing would have sort of folded.
My feeling, and I'm not very familiar with the entire Victorian repertoire, is that Rigondi was quite highbrow as far as concertina players went. He seemed to be quite marketable to the sort of the market for bourgeoisie sort of tutor book. I think it probably caught on fairly quickly in sort of lowbrow salient.
Might be something about being more suitable for women to play rather than having a piano accordion here or bagpipes and flutes and that kind of.
Which was what it's kind of substituting, whether or not it's substituting for accordion. I mean, I guess we think of it now as substituting for accordion type instruments, but I mean, I get the impression that then it's more a substitute for maybe the violin or something like that, or woodwind instruments.
I think that's why I was asking why.
I think so, but to the best of my knowledge, accordions and button accordions, or what we now term melodians, didn't sort of catch on in England until later. I don't know. Perhaps concertina was around first.
Is it that they're more robust? Would that be a reason for them taking off in families, for example, and travelling persons?
Then
You make it look robust.
Well, the more basic models actually aren't quite so robust. They're fairly rickety wooden contraptions, so it's very rare to find one in very good condition. There are some makers slash tuners slash restorers who do a fantastic job of keeping the extant instruments in very good condition. Mine is actually not very cosmetically good, but it has the original bellows. Ones like this with metal ends and sort of fairly heavy duty bellows are quite tough going. This was probably made as just to be a sort of maybe it could have been a concert instrument. It could have been a sort of Salvation Army type band instrument. Wooden ones, so sort of you have to be very careful with them.
One of the things that strikes me about not just that type of concertina, which in itself is a fabulous and lovely thing and very desirable, with the current concertina revival, i.e. the one that we've been having for the last 30 years or so, is how fearsomely expensive they are. Crazy. I mean, far more expensive than you would pay for a piano accordion or a top flight.
Well, there's only a finite number of these in existence, and they sort of they hold their value. There's a sort of trade in replacement reeds for these because newly manufactured concertinas, even quite expensive ones, have to use of necessity accordion reeds because they don't make reeds which work in the same way as concertina reeds anymore. So a sort of cheap wheatstone, which is beyond salvage, is inherently valuable still for its reeds to sort of be a Frankenstein donor for another instrument.
Right. Well, if there are any more questions, no?
I have a question.
Yes.
Would anyone like a chocolate pie?